Welcome to the GRE test prep program brought to you by TrboTest. In this particular video, we're looking specifically at reading comprehension questions. And as you already know, I am Professor Konstantine Onapolous, and I am your instructor throughout the GRE video series. And we will cover the reading comprehension right now. When you first log into the center, the testing center, and you're looking at the reading comprehension questions, you're going to see a screen similar to what you're looking at right now. On this screen, of course, you're going to see the statement questions 1 through 7 are based on the following reading passages. Right? Then you'll have a passage to read, and of course, that will be followed by a question and the prompts, the answers that go with it. All right. So the same passage will appear on every page for the next 7 questions so that you don't have to go back to it. And each one of the questions is there for you to look at. So let's go ahead and look at this particular passage. It says, historians have long recognized the traditional Japanese sword, or the Naruto, as one of the finest cutting weapons ever produced, but it has even been considered a spiritual entity. The adage, the sword is the soul of the samurai, reflects the sword's psychic importance, not only to the wielder, but also to its creator, the mastersmith. Not classically regarded as artists, the mastersmith nevertheless exert great care in the process of creating swords. No two of which were ever forged exactly the same way. Over hundreds of hours, 2 types of steel were repeatedly heated, hammered, and folded together into thousands of imperceptible layers, yielding both a razor-sharp, durable edge and a flexible, shock-absorbing blade. Commonly, though, originally, the smiths physically signed the blade. Moreover, each smith secretly forged techniques left an idiosyncratic structural signature. Each unique finished product reflected the smith's personal honor and devotion to craft. And today, the Japanese sword is valued as much as its artist's merit as for its historical significance. All right, so we have a passage here, of course, that's about the Japanese sword and the smith that makes it. So the first question says, the primary purpose of this passage is to. Now, we remember from the previous course where we talked about reading comprehension that the primary purpose of any passage is a global statement. It's not about any minute detail, it's about the overall purpose. So let's look at the question choices, or the answer choices we have for this question. A says, challenge the observation of the Japanese sword is highly admired by historians. Well, that's certainly true. Let's keep going because that's not the overall concept of what's going on here, but let's keep reading. Introduce new information about the forging of Japanese swords, okay? And not really. Identify the Japanese sword as a premier work of art. Argue that the Japanese sword makers are motivated by honor, or explain the value attributed to Japanese swords. So this one's relatively easy. It pretty much comes right to the point. Only one of them works. But if you want to look at it, we look at this and we say, okay, how do we handle this particular passage? How do we handle the question of the primary purpose? Well, to identify the primary purpose of the passage, examine the passage as a whole. Avoid answer choices that address only limited sections of the passage. The point of the passage, the Japanese sword has been considered not just a fine weapon, but a spiritual entity, is clearly established in the first 2 sentences. So the purpose of the passage is to explain and support this point. So we see that throughout. We realize we're explaining the value attributed to the Japanese sword, which is E. And so this whole focus is on the sword. And that's why we want to pick E for our answer. And of course, E is the correct answer. And E is correct because the passage describes the immense value of the Japanese sword to both the samurai and the sword's owner, the smith that makes it and the samurai who owns it. The saying, the sword is the soul of the samurai, is referenced early and indicates its importance. And later portions of the passage detail the tremendous effort that is put into each sword, reflecting the importance of each one. All right, let's look at another one. Number 2. All right, because the question 1 through 7 is based on the same passage, we don't have to reread the passage again unless we need to find the data. All right, so question 2 says each of the following is mentioned in the passage except. Watch out for these because the test makers love to use words like except to throw you off. So we're looking for 4 answers that are found in the passage, and our focus has to be on the one that's not. All right. So the answer choices we get are every Japanese sword has a unique structure that can be traced back to a special forging process. Well, certainly that's mentioned. So that one is fine. It's not our except. Mastersmiths kept their forging methodology secret. Okay, it's not necessarily mentioned, but it may be implied. So let's keep going. We'll keep that as a possible. C says the Japanese sword was considered by some to have spiritual qualities. Well, certainly, it tells us that it was considered a spiritual entity. So now we know that A and C certainly not the except. B has got some possibility, but let's keep going here. D says mastersmiths are now considered artists by major historians. All right, there's some possibility there. Okay. And E says the Japanese sword is considered both a work of art and a historical artifact. Well, we know that's true because that is mentioned in here. Right. So we need to narrow this down. We have 2 possible choices. And remember that we have the for an exception question here. So we almost always have something that's not mentioned in here. We eliminate the ones that were specifically mentioned in here. And we use the process of elimination. We eliminate the impossible. In this case, those things that are mentioned, we can cross out. We knew that A wasn't correct because that is something mentioned. Every Japanese sword has a unique structure that can be traced back. Certainly. B, we weren't sure about. C, the Japanese sword was considered by some to have spiritual qualities. Absolutely stated. Okay. D, mastersmiths are now considered artists by major historians. That's a question mark. And E, the Japanese sword is considered both a work of art and historical artifact. That also is mentioned in the passage. All right. So it's between B and D, but let's look at B first. Mastersmiths kept their forging methodology secret. All right. In the passage, it tells us that this was a secret. Mastersmith, nevertheless, exerted great care. This was something that they didn't want people to know about. They kept it secret. It was their signature, their idiosyncrasies were there. But this D here, mastersmiths are now considered artists by major historians. The passage doesn't say that. It actually says the opposite of that. So the answer is D. The time and effort mastersmiths devoted to making the sword is discussed. And the passage does indicate that Japanese sword is valued for its artistic merit. However, the passage does not state that major historians consider mastersmiths themselves to be artists. Major historians are not referenced in the passage at all. Moreover, who values the Japanese sword for its artistic merit is not mentioned. So that letter D is the correct answer. Number 3. Number 3 says the author is most likely to agree with which of the following observations. Right. A, the Japanese sword is the most important handheld weapon in history. The skill of the samurai is what made the Japanese sword so special. If a sword had a physical signature, other swords could be attributed to that sword's creator. Mastersmiths were more concerned with the artistic merit of their blades than about the blades' practical qualities, or the Japanese sword has more historical importance than artistic importance. So all of these are unique, but we only have one that the author is most likely to agree with. All right. In looking at this, we look at the statement, what would the author agree with? We see the author's point of view, his affection or her affection towards the sword. It talks about the fact that because there's idiosyncrasies, each sword has a signature to it as to who the maker is. Okay? What we want to avoid is extremes. If there's positions or streams that go beyond the author's statement, those are wrong, even if it's close. Remember, if it's only a half correct, it's not correct. Okay, so the answer that we have here, the Japanese sword is the most important handheld weapon in history. Nothing in this passage compares the sword to any other weapon. So that is not supported by the passage. B, the skill of the samurai is what made the Japanese sword so special. Again, that's actually contrary to what the passage talks about. B, if the sword had a physical signature, other swords could be attributed to the sword's creator. This is correct. C is our answer because C does address what's talked about in the passage, that each sword made by a specific smith had a signature to it. So C is our answer. According to the passage, every master smith had a structural signature due to his own secret forging process. Therefore, if a physical signature is present on a blade, that blade's structural signature could then be associated with a master smith whose master status implies the creation of numerous swords. So C. Number 4, which of the following can be inferred about the term structural signature in this passage? Remember that the word inferred, as used here, means that we have to pull it from the passage, but it cannot be stated in the passage. So if we find an answer that's actually stated in the passage, that is a wrong answer. We're looking for something that's not stated, reading between the lines, something that we can support with the material from the passage, but not actually stated. So let's look. The passage, it indicates the inscription that the smith placed on the blade during the forging process. Okay? That is certainly not an inference. Okay? It implies or infers the peculiar characteristics of the blade created by Smith's unique forging process. Again, something that's actually stated, that's not implied. It suggests that each blade can be traced back to a known master smith. Again, we're told that. It reflects the soul of the samurai who wields the sword. Or it refers to the unique curved shape of the blade. All right, what can we infer from this? Here the author says that he states that each smith's secret forging technique left an idiosyncratic structural signature. The word idiosyncratic and signature imply the uniqueness of the smith's process. Be careful not to infer any additional information, particularly when the question refers to a specific sentence or phrase. So if we look at this, it indicates an inscription of the smith placed on the blade during the forging process. Well, we're told that specifically. But B, we're not actually told specifically what it says. We are told enough about it. It implies the peculiar characteristics of the blade created by Smith's unique forging process. So let's go up here. It says the adage sword is the soul of the samurai reflects the sword's psychic importance, not only to its wielder, but also to its creator, the master smith. Not classically regarded as artists, this master smiths nevertheless exert great care in the process of creating swords, no two of which were ever forged exactly the same way. Okay, so if there's differences, those are peculiars. All right, exerted. So over hundreds of hours, 2 types of steel are we commonly throw the option of Smith's physical sign the blade. Okay? Moreover, each Smith's secret forging techniques left idiosyncratic structural signature. So B would be what's implied. Note that the proof sentence indicates that each smith has his own process. And so the structural signature was unique to each smith. not necessarily to each individual blade. Number 5, the author most likely describes the forging process in order to, well, we already see the answer popped up already. So let's just go through it. The author most likely describes the forging process in order to A, present an explanation for a change in perception, not even close, determine the historical signature of Japanese swords, not supported, explain why each Japanese sword is unique. Of course, the entire passage is about the uniqueness of this sword. D, compare Japanese mastersmiths to classic artists, no comparison is made here. And review the complete process of making a Japanese sword. There isn't a review of a complete process. They talk about a few things, but they certainly don't go into every step. As it says here, to determine the function of any part of a passage, pay attention to the emphasis placed or connected to that part. In particular, any reiteration points and to the relationship that part has to do with other portions of the passage. In this case, the description of the forging process extends the ideal introduced earlier that the Japanese sword is revered. Letter C is correct. The description of the foregoing process underscores the uniqueness of the individual Japanese sword. One sentence mentions that no two swords were ever forged in exactly the same way. Later, structural signatures and unique finish reinforce this point. So, of course, C is the correct answer. Number 6 is to select the sentence in the passage that best indicates that the author believes traditional Japanese swords are works of art. Right? So here, and you'll see these questions on the test itself, you want to pick where in the sentence this concept is put together. And if we look towards the very bottom, we start seeing that the smith's physical sign the blade. Moreover, each smith's secret forging techniques left idiosyncratic structural signature. Each unique finished product reflects the smith's personal honor. Select the sentence in the passage that best indicates that the author believes traditional Japanese swords are works of art. So we could go through this and we could look at it piece by piece. We want to kind of scan it to see where we can find where it's considered a work of art. But there's a devotion and honor to the smith and the craft today. The sword's value is as much for its artistic merit as for its historical signature or significance. So we can look at these things and we realize that it should be this last sentence. Each unique finished product reflects the smith's personal honor and devotion to the craft today. The passage first mentions the idea of the art in the third sentence, but indicates that the master smiths were not regarded as artists. After describing the meticulous forging process, the last sentence indicates that each sword is unique in its value, the artist's merit. All right, number 7, the last of this particular passage, it says, which of the following statements about Japanese swords is supported by the passage? All right, and it says select all that apply. All right. A, there is a way to determine the creator of a given sword other than his signature of the blade. Okay, well, we know that's true because we can look at the craftsmanship and how it was done. B, they have been viewed in terms other than purely material, not part of the process here. Okay. All right, why it went backwards, we don't know. They have not always received artistic recognition that they deserve. Okay, again, let's look at A because A is a perfect answer here. All right, the second to last sentence says that each smith's secret forging techniques left idiosyncratic structural signature. This structural signature then could possibly be used to determine the creator of the given sword. All right. Well, we know B is also correct because the first sentence tells you that the Japanese sword has been considered a spiritual entity. So it's got something more than purely material. And C says they have not always received the artistic recognition that they deserve. Well, certainly that's true because originally they were thought of as a fighting weapon and not so much as an artistic production. It even tells us they weren't thought of as artistic. So C would also be correct. All right, in the next passage, it says that questions 8 through 12 are based on the following reading passage. All right. In the early years of television, Vladimir Dworkin was considered its inventor. Now, I want to make a point here for you to remember when you're taking this test. If you come across the name that you don't know or you're not sure how to enunciate, don't worry about it. Skip it. Put your own name in there. Put a friend's name in there. It doesn't matter. It's not important to the context or the answers to these questions. So don't get caught up in that, because ultimately what will happen is if you're trying to figure out how to say it, your brain will focus on that and waste all kinds of energy that it needs to finish this test. So don't. Go through this with, in the early years of television, Vladimir was considered its inventor, at least publicly. His loudest champion was his boss, David. There's no need for these last names. The only thing they're important for is historical remembering of these people, which is awesome, but not for this test. The president of RCA and the father of television. He was and is widely regarded. Modern historians agree that Philo Farnsworth, a self-educated progeny who was the first to transmit live images, was television's technical inventor. But Farnsworth's contributions have gone relatively unnoticed, since it was Sarnoff, not Farnsworth, who put televisions into living rooms, and even more importantly, who successfully borrowed from the radio industry the paradigm of advertising-funded programming, a paradigm still dominant today. In contrast, Farnsworth lacked business savvy and was unable to realize his dream of television as an educational tool. Perhaps Sarnoff simply adopted his business ideas from other industries, such as newspapers, for instance, replacing the revenue from subscriptions and newsstand purchases with that of television set sales. But Sarnoff promoted himself as a visionary. Some critics argue that Sarnoff's construct has damaged programming content. Others contend that it's merely created a democratic platform, allowing audiences to choose the programming they desire. So it's a nice background, a lot of details about television, and some men that made it possible for us to have televisions the way we have today. So let's look at this. The primary purpose of the passage. The primary purpose of this passage is pretty obvious, but let's look at the choices we have. A, correct public misconception about Farnsworth's role in developing early television programs. Debate the influence of the television on popular culture. Challenge the current public perception of Vladimir. Chronicle the events that led from the development of radio to the invention of the television. Or describe Sarnoff's influence on the public perception of television's inception and debate the impact of Sarnoff's paradigm. Well, in this case, the answer is obviously E. We can rule out the other four right off the top. They don't fit. Let's look at A again. Correct public misconception. There's nothing in here. It talks about little details here and there, but it isn't arguing a point. So we can eliminate A. They don't debate the influence of television on popular culture at all. C says challenge the current public perception of Vladimir. It doesn't challenge anything. It talks about him being considered an inventor. So there isn't really an argument about that. Chronicle the events that led from the development of radio to the invention of the television, not even covered here. So the only thing we would have left is E, that describes Sarnoff's influence on the public perception of television's inception. So he gets the credit because people remember him, because he put himself out there, not because he did it. and debate the impact of Sarnoff's paradigm. So again, his paradigm was to charge for advertising to pay for programming. So the answer to the primary purpose question should incorporate elements of the entire passage. Avoid answer choices that address limited sections of the passage. The point, Sarnoff was responsible for introducing television to the public and establishing a dominant paradigm. This is foreshadowed when Sarnoff is called the father of television. So again, E is the most appropriate answer. The answer includes the main elements of both paragraphs. It functions as a good summary of the entire passage. Number 9, same passage, so we don't need to reread it. It can be inferred from the second paragraph of the passage that television shows produced by David Sarnoff and Vladimir tended to earn negative reviews. It doesn't go into any of that. B, educational programs cannot draw as large an audience as sports programs. No mention of sports programs. The drawing effect isn't talked about in this passage. It certainly isn't in the second paragraph. C, a number of critics feel that Sarnoff's initial decision to earn television revenue through advertising has had a positive or neutral impact on its content. Of course, that's the opposite of what's pointed out here, because it says here that some critics argue that Sarnoff's construct has damaged program content. D, educational programs that are aired in prime time, the hour during which the greatest number of viewers are watching television, are less likely to earn a profit than those that are aired during the daytime hours. Not part of our concept. E, in matters of programming, the audience's preference should be more influential than those of the advertiser. That is specifically stated here. Others contend that the merely created a democratic platform allowing audiences to choose the programming they desire. So we have all kinds of answers. E is a strong one, but let's really dig into this, okay? A number of critics feel that Sarnoff's initial decision to earn television revenue through advertising has had a positive or neutral impact on content. So originally, or a few moments ago, I focused on the critics that were against Sarnoff. But I want you to realize that that happens often when we read these. We remember something that stands out and we forget to look a little further. If we look just a little bit further on the second paragraph, and let's do that together, we're going to see that C actually is the best answer. Perhaps Sarnoff simply adopted his business ideas from other industries, such as newspapers. For instance, replacing the revenue from subscriptions and newsstand purchases with that of television set sales, but Sarnoff promoted himself as the visionary. Some critics, notice the key words here, some critics argue that Sarnoff's construct has damaged program content. Well, if some critics have argued the negative, then we have to have other critics who argued the positive or the neutrality. So C would be our answer here. You are told that some critics argue that Sarnoff's paradigm has damaged programming content. Since the word is some, it must be true that others feel it has played either a positive role or a neutral role. A group of these critics is mentioned in the last sentence of the paragraph. Number 10, according to the passage, the television industry earned revenue from advertising only, advertising the sale of television sets, advertising and subscriptions, subscriptions and the sales of television sets, advertising, subscriptions, and the sale of television sets. And keep in mind that they have some misleading answers that can trick you. They're called trap answers, and they tend to be the ones that students who aren't certain typically pick. So the note here is, in order to trick you on a specific question such as this, the GRE will offer incomplete answers that incorporate language from throughout the passage, but do not directly bear on the question at hand. Two sections of the passage discuss ways in which the television industry fraud and revenue. The first paragraph mentions advertiser-funded programming. The second paragraph states that Sarnoff borrowed from other business models by replacing the revenue from subscriptions and newsstand purchases with that of television set sales. So in this case, B would be the only correct answer, advertising and the sale of television sets. Number 11. Select the sentence that provides factual evidence that Sarnoff's talents were more imitative than innovative. Okay, so we know when we read through here that the point was made to tell us about he may have copied more or borrowed more from other industries instead of actually made something. He wasn't so innovative as he was imitative. So let's look at the second paragraph here. Perhaps Sarnoff simply adapted his business ideas from other industries such as the newspaper. For instance, replacing the revenue from subscriptions and newspaper stands. So he promoted himself as a visionary, as an innovator, but that's really not what we see from this passage. This is a select and passage question, obviously, relating to Sarnoff's legacy as an imitator versus his legacy as an innovator. There are two plausible candidates. First, the second to last sentence of the first paragraph says that Sarnoff successfully borrowed from the radio industry the paradigm of advertiser-funded programming. This sentence states a fact indicating that Sarnoff took a business model from another medium, which would be imitative rather than innovative. Okay. Now, there's another possibility here. That's the first. The second possible answer is the first sentence of the second paragraph, which says perhaps Sarnoff simply adopted his business idea from other industries, such as the newspaper. However, the use of the word perhaps means that this is an idea of the authors rather than a statement of fact. And if we look at the statement here, it says, select the sentence that provides factual evidence. So it can't be the perhaps. So we've got to go back to the first paragraph and the second to last sentence in the first paragraph. And if we do that, then we realize that Sarnoff's contributions have gone relatively unnoticed since it was Sarnoff, not Farnsworth, who put televisions into living rooms, and even more importantly, who successfully borrowed from the radio industry. That's the fact. This was the thought. So it said factual. So be careful and watch for those words. Number 12 says, which of the following statements is supported by the passage? All right. So the statements here, the advertising funded model of television has damaged program content. The contributions of television's technical inventors were overshadowed by the actions of those who popularized the medium. There is no way to definitively prove who invented the first television. Okay. This one is pretty clean. It's pretty easy to understand, but be careful. All right. Expect to need extra time on select one or more questions. The reason for that, of course, is because they can be very tricky in how they word them. All right. This one, annoyingly, does not provide any clues about where to look in the passage. So you have to use the keywords in each sentence to determine where to examine the passage. And you want to look, the advertiser-funded model of television has damaged programming content. It doesn't actually say that. It says that some critics argue that, but it doesn't say that that's a fact. All right. So we need something that was supported, a statement that was supported. So A is ruled out. B says the contributions of television's technical inventors were overshadowed by the actions of those who popularized the medium. Well, that is very much so supported because we look at Vladimir here, who did actually invent it, but no one's heard of him because David Sarnoff was the one who pushed this into the media for everybody to find. So B is a definite candidate for our answer here. And C, of course, we can look at there is no way to definitively prove the invention of the first television. Well, that makes absolutely no sense because we know who invented the first television. So C is definitely out, A is definitely out. So B has to be our answer. And of course, B is the first paragraph indicates that Farnsworth was the technical inventor of television. This paragraph also says that Farnsworth's contributions have gone relatively unnoticed, since it was Cernoff who put televisions in living rooms. So we have to be very careful. All right, number 13. Okay, this says questions number 13 through 19 are based on the following passage. So we have a new passage, we have a new set of questions. The passage says, because of the proximity and likeness of Mars to Earth, scientists have long speculated about the possibility of life on Mars. Roughly 3 centuries ago, astronomers observed Martian polar ice caps, and later scientists discovered other similarities to Earth, including length of day and axial tilt. But in 1965, photos taken with the Mariner 4 probe revealed a Mars without rivers, oceans, or signs of life. Moreover, in 1990s, it was discovered that unlike Earth, Mars no longer possessed a substantial global magnetic field, allowing celestial radiation to reach the planet's surface and solar winds to eliminate much of Mars' atmosphere over the course of several billion years. More recent probes have investigated whether there was once liquid water on Mars. Some scientists believe that the presence of certain geological landforms definitely resolved this question. Others posit that the wind erosion or carbon dioxide oceans may be responsible for these formations. Mars rover Opportunity and Spirit, which landed on Mars in 2004, have both discovered geological evidence of past water activities. These findings substantially bolster claims that there once was life on Mars. Question 13 says, the author's stance on the possibility of life on Mars can best be described as optimistic, disinterested, skeptical, simplistic, or cynical. Well, the passage is more concerned with the possibility of life on Mars. It details the various discoveries that have been made over centuries. The passage can best be described as factual and unbiased. When considering a tone question such as this, look for instances in which the author's opinion is revealed. You should also remember to be wary of extreme words in the answer choices. Right? So with that information in mind, we look at this again and we ask our question again. The author's stance on the possibility of life on Mars can best be described as optimistic. He doesn't really seem to be optimistic about it. He's non-committal. He's disinterested. That's a good word. B, disinterested. Doesn't care either way. Skeptical? No, he doesn't write this in a way to make it sound like the interest of science is off. It's not simplistic because he gets into the fact that it could happen and he shows us dates and times. And of course, he's not cynical because he's not talking negative or that these people made this up or they never went to Mars or this is all fake. There's no cynicism here. So B is the only appropriate answer. He's disinterested. Either way, yeah, whatever. This is the facts. I'm just giving them to you. So B is correct, disinterested. Note that the primary meaning of disinterested is impartial, neutral, which accurately describes the tone of the argument. Hey, just whatever. I'm okay either way. There's pros and cons here. I'm just reporting the facts. Number 14. The passage is primarily concerned with which of the following? Disproving a widely accepted theory, initiating a debate about the possibility of life on Mars, presenting evidence in support of a controversial claim, describing the various discoveries made concerning the possibility of life on Mars, and detailing the findings of the Mars rover Opportunity and Spirit. This one's pretty obvious. If we go through this and we look, it doesn't seem to disprove anything. It's not there to disprove, it just presents the facts. It's not initiating a debate about the possibility of life on Mars, because again, it's just giving us the facts. C, present evidence in support of a controversial claim. It doesn't support either side more than the other. D, describing the various discoveries made concerning the possibility of life on Mars. That certainly would be the right answer, D. It's describing the possibilities. It's not necessarily arguing true or false. And E, of course, detailing the findings of the Mars rover's opportunity and spirit. It barely mentions them, that they went there in 2004 and they discovered geological evidence of past water activity. That's it. So that would not be the primary concern of the passage itself. So if we look at this passage as primary concern with the possibility of life on Mars, the two paragraphs discuss various discoveries that have been made over the past few centuries. The passage concludes that the recent findings substantiate claims that there was once life on Mars. However, scientists are still not certain. And determining the purpose or main idea of the passage, you have to avoid extreme words and be able to defend every word. So again, the only answer that works is D, because it's just describing the various discoveries. It's not arguing one way or another. It's not trying to start an argument. It's not taking a position. Number 15. Each of the following discoveries is mentioned in the passage except wind erosion and carbon dioxide oceans are responsible for certain geological landforms on Mars. B, Mars does not have a substantial global magnetic field. C, some water activity exists on Mars at some point in the past. The length of day of Mars is similar to that of Earth, and the axial tilt of Mars is similar to that of Earth. So we're looking for each of the following discoveries as mentioned in the passage except. So let's go through here. Wind erosion and carbon dioxide oceans are responsible for certain geological landforms on Mars. All right. Mars does not have substantial global magnetic field. Some water activity existed on Mars at some point in the past. The length of day on Mars is similar to that on Earth, and the axis tilt of Mars is similar to that on Earth. So let's go back and look at this. All right. First thing we remember is it says including the length of day and axis tilt, that being similar to Earth. So D and E are out because they are mentioned in here. Okay. Then it says because of proximity, likeness, earth science along blah, 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 3 centuries. Right. Photos taken by the Mariner 4 probe revealed a Mars without rivers, oceans, or signs of life. Moreover, in the 1990s, it was discovered that unlike Earth, Mars no longer possesses a substantial global field, allowing celestial radiation to reach the planet's surface and solar winds to eliminate much of Mars' atmosphere over the course of several billion years. More recent probes have investigated whether there was once liquid on Mars. Some scientists believe that the presence of certain geological landforms definitely resolves this question. Others posit that wind erosion and carbon dioxide oceans may be responsible for these formations. All right. So then it goes on to say, in Mars in 2004 have both discovered geological evidence of past water activity. So some water activity exists on Mars at some point in the past. That's mentioned. So we get rid of C. Okay. B says Mars does not have a substantial global magnetic field, and A says wind erosion and carbon dioxide oceans are responsible for certain geological landforms on Mars. All right. So let's look at the thought process here. What's going on? We're kind of stuck between A and B. All right. It does tell us that at some point this global magnetic field was eroded. It's no longer there. So we can get rid of B because it says Mars does not have a substantial global magnetic field. That's true now because they're saying it doesn't. It used to, but it doesn't. Okay, so then we're left with wind erosion and carbon dioxide oceans are responsible for certain geographical landforms on Mars. While this passage does say some scientists believe that the presence of certain geological landforms definitely resolve this question, others posit the wind erosion and carbon dioxide oceans may be responsible. The maybe. It's not a fact. It's not proven. But this statement A says wind erosion and carbon dioxide are responsible. That's a statement of fact. So A is the only one that's an exception. So to address a specific question, we have to point out specific evidence in the text to defend the answer choice. The passage discovers several discoveries. And to answer this question, we find which of the answer choices is not a discovery specifically mentioned in the passage. And like I said, well, it said that it may be, but there's a possibility of it. It doesn't make it a statement of fact, and A does. So A is the exception. The passage does mention the wind erosion and carbon dioxide ocean, but the author states that these are other possible explanations for certain landforms on Mars. Wind erosion and carbon dioxide oceans are possible causes. So A would be eliminated, would be the exception. Number 16. In the first paragraph, the author most likely mentions the discovery of polar ice caps to suggest that A, until recently, Mars polar ice caps were thought to consist largely of carbon dioxide. B, Martian polar ice caps are made almost entirely of water ice. C, Mars has many similarities to Earth, including the existence of polar ice caps. D, Mars has only a small fraction of the carbon dioxide found on Earth and Venus. Or E, conditions on the planet Mars were once very different than they are presently. Okay, again, the question. In the first paragraph, the author most likely mentions the discovery of polar ice caps to suggest this is a specific question that refers back to the second sentence of the first paragraph. All right. The best approach is to reread the sentence and determine using surrounding sentences what the author's purpose is in mentioning Mars polar ice caps. If you read the second part of the sentence, later scientists discovered other similarities to Earth, including length of days and axial tilt. You notice the polar ice caps are introduced as an example of a similarity of Mars to Earth. Right? So with that in mind, let's go back and look again. The author most likely mentioned the discovery of polar ice caps suggests that until recently, Mars polar ice caps were thought to consist largely of carbon dioxide. Nothing in this passage talks about that. So if you have outside knowledge, let's say you already know about polar ice caps on Mars, you've read about it, you've studied about it, you should not use that information when you're taking this test. That information is abstract or outside of what the passage is talking about. So you want to focus only on the data they give you. You're better off coming into these tests and reading these questions with zero knowledge because you can only use the material and the information that's provided on this test. For instance, if you were from the country of Chile and you knew that in South America, that when it's winter in North America, it's summer in South America. So November, December, January, February, there's summer in Chile. Right? But if you read in this passage that in the months of January, it was 32 degrees below zero in Chile, and you happen to know that's impossible because it's summer, it doesn't matter. You have to answer the question based on the data that's given to you in the passage. So forget what you know about Mars, forget what you may know about any of the subjects you read about, and focus only on the information they provide. All right, so back to this. Until recently, Mars polar ice caps were thought to consist largely of carbon dioxide. Nothing in this passage would give us that data. We can look at here, and carbon dioxide is mentioned about the wind erosion, but it doesn't mention that with the ice cap. That's information we don't have, therefore we have to ignore it, and we know that A is wrong. B says Martian polar ice caps are made almost entirely of water ice. Again, information we're not told about, so information we can't use to answer these questions. So B is out. It's introducing information we don't have. Anytime an answer introduces data or information that we don't have in the passage, we can rule that answer out. C says Mars has many similarities to Earth, including the existence of polar ice caps. That would be a true statement. Polar ice caps is mentioned as it's mentioning about the tilt of the axis and the length of days. So it's a comparative point. They're making that to show that Mars is a lot like Earth. Okay? D says Mars has only a few fractions of carbon dioxide found on Earth and Venus. Introduction of new material, information we don't have in the passage, therefore that is automatically eliminated. E, conditions of the planet Mars were once very different than that present. Well, that's told in the passage. They do introduce the fact that Mars is different now than what it was in the past, or at least they believe it to be different. But that has nothing to do with the ice caps. And the question is about the reason the author mentioned the discovery of the ice caps. So that's eliminated. So the only possible answer is C. Not only is it correct in this sentence, but the rest don't work at all. (17) Each of the following can be inferred from the passage except, all right? The presence of certain geological landforms is not definitive proof that there was once life on Mars. Similarities to Earth bolster the idea that a planet might be or have been capable of supporting life. The absence of a substantial global magnetic field on Mars suggests that it would be difficult to sustain life on Mars. The presence of water activity on Mars is related to the possibility of life on Mars. And E, the claim that there was once water on Mars has only limited and indirect support from recent discoveries. Okay, before you jump at the answer here, remember the question very carefully, consider it, think about it. Each of the following can be inferred from the passage except. All right, let's look at these. A, the presence of certain geological landforms is not definitive proof of life on Mars. Well, we have two different scientific opinions here. Some scientists believe that this resolves the question, others believe that it has nothing to do with it. So we can infer that. It's not definitive. If two people disagree that are educated and are both specialists in the field and they can't agree on it, it's not definitive. So we can infer that. That's fine. A is valid, but it's not except. So we cross that one off. B says similarities to Earth bolster the idea that the planet might be or have been capable of supporting life. Again, there are numerous similarities, and we can infer that these similarities support the idea to one level or another. So B is part of this, and it's an inference, a valid inference. So it's not the except. Right? C, the absence of substantial global magnetic field on Mars suggests that it would be difficult to sustain life on Mars. While this could be inferred, we have to be careful because the passage itself talks about the fact that this magnetic field no longer exists. So that infers that it did at one time, and if it did at one time, then there would be the ability to sustain life. So C becomes very questionable, but let's keep going. D says the presence of water activity on Mars is related to the possibility of life on Mars. Again, the word possibility here makes it an inference. It is possible that if there was truly water on Mars, that there also could have been life. So D is a possibility. So D is okay. It's not the except. E says the claim that there was once water on Mars has only limited and indirect support from recent discoveries. Again, this can be inferred because it's only the recent discoveries that have shown us that there's a possibility that there's water. So it's kind of indirect. It's not a direct, it's not definitive. So it really leaves us with only C to look at, right? And if we look at this really close, we realize that even C, okay, is not an except because it does talk about the magnetic field, right? So let's look at this. A question that asks for an inference from the passage is a specific question. It is helpful to find evidence for any inferences in the text. Make sure each inference can be defended by going back to the text. It does not go far beyond the language of the passage. All right, so A, we realize clean, no problem, it's mentioned. B, clean, no problem, it was mentioned. C, I had a question mark on because it says the absence of substantial global magnetic field on Mars suggests that it would be difficult to sustain life on Mars. So while it used to have, and it no longer does, if it doesn't now, it certainly would be hard to sustain life now. So you could infer that. That's a possibility. It's still a question mark, but it's an impossibility. D, of course, the presence of water activity on Mars related to possible life. That is a definite because it uses the word possibility. E is where the question mark comes in. The claim that there was once water on Mars has only limited and indirect support from recent discoveries. This, while being true, is not really an inference because it's not inferred, it's actually stated that these recent discoveries have raised some questions. These findings substantially bolster claims, but that fits what they're saying. So we have to be careful with this. However, C could be inferred. E is actually stated, so E has to be the except. According to the second paragraph, the Mars rover Opportunity and Spirit have both discovered geological evidence of the past water activity. It's made clear by the subsequent sentence that these findings substantially both claims. The evidence supporting the claim that there was once water on Mars is substantial. Thus, the passage contradicts the statement that this claim is supported by only marginal evidence. Number 18, it can be inferred from the passage that which of the following characteristics of a planet would imply that it might support life. Okay, remember we're looking for an inference and we have the key word it might. So a significant global magnetic field, evidence of liquid carbon dioxide on the planet's surface, and the average daily level of sunlight reaching the planet's surface. So we have to be able to infer these from the passage, the following characteristics of the planet. Most of the passage is about what aspects of Mars might or might not imply that it once supported life. So it seeks out direct language in the passage to prove or disprove each of these possible choices. And so significant global magnetic field, we know that they talk about the fact that it no longer has one, creates a problem. So yes, that would be something that would imply that there might be life support, the characteristic, if it existed. So A definitely can work. And from that, we don't see B, evidence of liquid carbon dioxide in the planet's surface having anything to do with supporting life or the average daily level of sunlight. So A becomes the only possible answer. Number 19, it says select the sentence in the passage that provides the best evidence that at the given time, life did not exist on Mars. All right. So if we go through this and we look, we realize that this is a sentence. It's best to reread it or scan it anyway to try to figure out where that possibly could be, that it provides the best evidence. So it's not an inference, it's not a speculation, it's not a could be. We're looking for evidence. At the given time, life did not exist on Mars. Okay. The question asks for evidence that life does not exist on Mars at the time the evidence was collected. So we can look through here and there's quite a difference of places to look, But let's look at the clue here. The correct answer probably would not be found in the second paragraph, which mostly provides evidence that there was life on Mars at one point. In the first paragraph, however, the third sentence says that in 1965, photos revealed a Mars without rivers, oceans, or signs of life, providing evidence that life did not exist at that time. The next sentence indicates that the lack of a magnetic field caused some negative consequences incompatible with life. However, this sentence says that there is no longer such a magnetic field, indicating the field did once exist. So the answer is found in the fact that in 1965, there was no rivers, oceans, or signs of life. That is the evidence that at that particular given moment in time, no life existed on Mars. That doesn't mean it didn't previous, and it doesn't mean it doesn't in the future tense. It just didn't at that moment. That's the evidence we have. All right, that brings us to the end of this particular review of reading comprehension. As always, if you have any questions, any comments, you would like help or more direction, connect at TrboTest.com.